That's too quiet. I'm not going to be able to hear that. Alrighty then. Back to working on combos. Jumping rope is hard. Jumping rope in a really tight space. A punching bag on one side, a bike hanging from the ceiling right in front of me, and my kettlebells and parallettes right behind me is even harder. All right, so today I think I'm going to keep working on hooks. And I haven't quite figured out exactly how I'm going to do that. Last week I was experimenting with having the bottom of the bag fastened in place. I had a rope going from here to here, or a piece of cordage going from there, from the post to the post, and the bottom of the bag was tied to it. Well, on Thursday, I think it was Thursday, I ripped the loop out of the bottom of the bag, and now I can no longer fasten it down, which is most unfortunate. Also, kind of a dig on the makers of the bag. They obviously didn't take into account that people would actually be hitting it. So, not sure exactly how I'm going to skin that cat. And my jumping rope is still awful. I suppose it's probably at least entertaining watching me tangle myself up in a jump rope. So, why hooks? Well, a hook is a very powerful close-range technique. You can end a fight with a good solid hook. And it doesn't even require a ton of strength. Like, you don't have to be a super big in the upper body. You just have to have good technique and land it accurately. The reason why is because when you land a good accurate hook on the lower jaw, the point of the chin, side of the face right here, you get that rotational movement of the skull. And that can, where the skull is doing this, and the brain is kind of trying to be stationary inside it. So it whacks the brain. The brain actually bounces against the inside of the skull. It's where the lights out button is. Is it a guarantee? No. There are no guarantees. But it is a very powerful and useful technique. Now, that being said, my hooks are much more, as we've seen, are much more strong than they are fast, which means they're not powerful. Or not as powerful as they could be. Tons of people smaller and not as strong as I am can generate a lot more power because they generate it with their legs instead of with their upper body. And me, being the meathead I am, tend to generate power with my upper body. Or try to anyways. About 20 seconds left on the jump rope. So what I've got rigged up over here is one of the bungees, elastic bands. And I think I'm going to start working on some rotational force with that. And we'll see how that translates into a good solid hook. All right. So there's a bunch of different ways I could try to twist this. One, I could just try and push it from here. If I'm doing that, my core and my hips are mostly stabilizing. So I'm only able to generate with the joints of my shoulder joint, essentially, is the only joint that's actually moving. My hips, my core are remaining stationary. The other way I could do it is for my hips to remain stationary and try and twist my torso. And I would call that almost as useless as standing there stationary and trying to push it with my shoulders. Almost, and in some ways even more useless, but not quite. So if I'm standing stationary and I'm just moving my shoulders like this, I'm still bracing with my core. I'm generating force as a counter-rotational force with my core, which is not a useless thing to do. It's very important, actually. A lot of the time, that is what our core is required to do, is that counter-rotational force. So in order to press this way with my shoulders, I have to clench, I have to flex this glute and brace with my abdomen, especially my obliques here, so that my hips don't go anywhere. So it's not a bad exercise, and indeed it's a very important one for overall core strength and stability. In life in general, our core stabilizes us far more often than it moves us. If I'm picking something up, I'm not trying to have a mobile midsection here bending in the waist. I'm trying to keep this midsection stationary, and I'm trying to get all of my movement from my hips. Same thing goes with punching. I'm not trying to be absolutely stationary through here and just throw that hook with my shoulder, but nor am I trying to really twist my core as much. A little bit, but not as much. What I really want is for my core to be braced and to generate that twist with my hips. So I've got my band out here. So that's my core, and my shoulders are remaining stationary, and I'm generating the rotation with my hips. And that is very similar to shooting, where my core and my shoulders want to remain stationary, and I'm generating my movement from my hips as I move and I target things. There's limits to that, of course. If I'm moving and shooting laterally, I want my hips to be going one way and my shoulders and my torso to be pointing a different way, kind of like the turret on a tank. But when I'm throwing a punch, I kind of want a combination of all three. I want all of those joints to be involved to maximize my potential like a whip. So what it wants to look like is something like this. So I'm bracing, no movement up here, generating the turn with my hips, and then as I get into it, as my hips reach their maximum, then my torso starts to turn, and then the punch comes out. So it's actually really uncomfortable holding that thing like that. Same thing on the other side. When I was first starting out in boxing, I was taught by several different instructors, but the shoulder actually doesn't move in the hook. You're in your stance, you rotate your fist like this, and then you just turn. And depending on the situation, I would say, I'll actually do that. Like if I'm boxing with somebody and we get tied up and I'm close enough, I'll actually grab his left guard with my other hand, and then and pulling the guard out of the way with this hand and smacking him in the side of the head with this hand. So there's a sense in which that is, there are situations in which that is exactly how it actually goes down. But very often I'm trying to throw this hook from maximum range. So I'm trying to get the hook punch, but I'm not trying to be at hook range, because if I'm this close to him, the length of my upper arm, I don't care how short he is, I'm within his striking distance. And now I also have to be concerned with punches. Whereas if I can jab, and slip in just the tiniest little bit and get that hook behind his guard, well, I'm now using distance to my advantage and still getting the advantage of a hook. So at that point, when I start that punch, I'm going to initiate it, but I'm going to follow through with my shoulder. And without the band, the other situation in which I'm going to use my shoulder to throw that hook is if I'm throwing a repeat hook. So if I'm trying to hit somebody 3 times with this right hook, I'm not going to reset my hips every time. That's kind of silly. I'm going to hit hard with that first hook and then just mini resets. I'm not coming all the way back to here because it wastes time. So I hit him, and there, while his guard is still down, I'm going to try and drop 2 more on top of that before I come in with that left hook. So I practice the technique of developing power in an ideal scenario, whether that's with a kick, getting my knee all the way up and throwing it out while driving with my rear foot. Yeah, important to practice that technique, the pure technique, but also important to realize that sometimes that's not actually how it's going to go down. Sometimes I'm going to adjust the technique to the situation. So that's where I may not actually get a full 90-degree angle like this, where I'm hitting his head exactly like that. I may be a little bit offline from him, and then I'm going to have to kind of come through here, and as I'm hitting, extend straight out. So it's kind of like hooking in and throwing the head offline like that. It's important to practice the pure technique so that your body has kind of a muscle memory of how to generate force in any position. But then when you're actually throwing that punch in a competition or a fight, your body is just generating force based on the scenario. You can't think through that in an actual fight or in a competition. You can't think through that, the mechanics of throwing every technique, because your cognitive processes are just too slow. All right, now let's see how it looks now. wish this bag would just hold still. Dropped on my heels on that one. All right, so I think something I'm doing wrong with that on that round is I'm, especially with that left, but whichever one I'm finishing with, I'm pushing through the bag, which is different from punching through. You're supposed to punch through, but punching through is and then coming back along the same track that the punch went out on. What I'm doing is I'm leaving my hand on the bag and trying to get a little extra push there. I need to stop doing that and get to resetting that punch. Like that. That's why I'm doing it. Because it's not coming back on the same path. When I throw one, the rotation of throwing the number two is bringing the number three punch. The rotation of throwing the number four, that's bringing the number four back along the same path. But when I'm finishing with that four, there's no rotation, or I'm not doing any rotation, I'm just kind of dragging it back to my head. So how do I fix that? Hook, 4, 3, 4. Yeah, cover. You need to come back into a cover. That'll do it. So I'm still from that extended position where I'm finishing that number 4 punch, I have to rotate back into a covered position.
Ready?
Yeah, much better. Kind of sea walking my way across the floor here. Well, I think my hip movements are a little faster than they were last week anyways. So, covered. All right. Okay, so change it up just a little bit. I'm going to throw the close hooks for a couple of rounds. Because these I'm kind of throwing elbow at maybe 125 degrees. So let's get in closer and throw that 90-degree elbow hook.
Ready?
Clinch. 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 Where would I use that? Breaking a clinch, maybe. So, top with the hips, drive with the forehead to create. So from an upright, get my base under me. create enough space to rotate the shoulder out. 1, 2, 3. Great, finish creating that space. So that would be somebody who's maybe a grappler, maybe a wrestler, judoka, or just a really big guy who wants to tie up and just wrap me up, pick me up, and drop me. Let's run that a couple more times then.
Ready?
All right, I'm gonna pick up the tempo. I think my feet are too far apart. All right. So I kind of like that. I think that setting up with popping the hips away is kind of a good opening for it. And then I'm trying to get in behind whatever arms he's got wrapped around my head. Whack, whack, to get him to draw his guard back in to cover his face. And as he's doing that, I'm creating space. One more round, I think. Pop myself back further than I intended that time. No worries, happens. Same thing. We're gonna next 4 rounds remaining. Next 4 rounds, at least the next 2. I'm gonna go slip, cover, slip, and hook. So this is kind of the opposite scenario. That one was somebody trying to tie me up and I'm creating space. This is somebody who's trying to create space. Maybe wants to box me at this distance, and I want to get in close where his kicks and long range punches aren't going to be as effective. So if I'm covering, let's see, I'm fighting southpaw. So assuming an orthodox fighter, his long range punches, his longest range is going to be coming in from this side. Hang on a second. All right, if he's right-handed, he's going to have his left foot forward. I'm having my left foot to the rear, so his left foot is here. So his long-range stuff is coming in from this side. Okay. So his kicks and jabs are coming in from this side. I want to crowd cover, slip in, and get inside his comfortable range. So here I am, a very uncomfortable range for me. He can kick, he can jab. I'm not good at that. I don't want to play that game. So cover. And do I want to slip into the kicks, into the attacks, or do I want to slip off towards his center line? I think if it's an orthodox fighter, I kind of want to get off his center line, which means crowding and trying to stuff that. I'm trying to stuff that hook in
Ready?
his face as I move in. All right. Now, still trying to lead with that right hook. Block. Yeah. All right, it's more of like a Wing Chun type thing. Cover, defense and attack in the same movement. Then pommel for a little bit. Probably wouldn't be jumping back out to range, so let's move into a clinch instead. And that was a bear hug kind of clinch. Very unscientific, that. So again, as I'm moving into the clinch, getting even further off center line, that angular movement. Might have to start it from over here so I don't run into the kettlebells. So, cover. Yeah. So I've got that hook coming, or a kick or a jab coming in, cover, lunge in, hook, get his hands up and give him something to think about, hook, hook, rotating even further offline, dive in,
Ready?
well, scoop in for that double under, a double arm, underhooks, that's what they're. That's a clumsy left hook and leading left. You just swing under for that. Sound effects help. All right, one more round. I think I'm gonna switch it up and work on one of the most difficult setups for this combo, the most difficult for me, and that is a change level come up hook. I say it's difficult for me because my duck under is slow.
Ready?
And my knees hurt because they're old and beat up. As I go through the reps, my feet have a tendency to scoop wider and wider apart. Yeah, I do not like changing level. It hurts. That low hook. All well and good for a boxing match. All well and good for a boxing match. Honestly, limited usefulness, I think, on the street, because you got to hit, somebody's hopped up on adrenaline or meth, both of which are excellent drugs. Somebody's all hopped up and aching to put a knife in your ribs, and you punch him in the ribs, you may not even feel it. Like, you gotta hit him pretty hard to get him winded with that hook to the ribs. So I would think of it more as something that I'm just tossing in there, kind of maybe a little distractor that I'm tossing in there on my way to fighting for control of that knife. Honestly, that might even be a bad use of it because it might take up that extra half second. Yeah, probably should spar that one out and see how it goes. All right, well, that's all for this week. I'm going to finish up my workout and go get cleaned up. If I can find my mouse cursor. There we go.